The small town of Pinewood, nestled in the heart of Oregon, was known for its tranquil atmosphere and close-knit community. Among its many charms was the Peaceful Waters Buddhist Center, a modest establishment that had become a sanctuary for those seeking inner peace and spiritual guidance. The center, run by the dedicated Reverend Sarah Thompson, had been a fixture in Pinewood for over 2 decades. On a crisp autumn morning, as the leaves began to turn shades of gold and red, an unexpected delivery arrived at Peaceful Waters. A large wooden crate was carefully unloaded from a nondescript truck, its contents a mystery to everyone except Reverend Thompson. With practiced calm, she directed the delivery men to place the crate in the main meditation hall. Once alone, Sarah took a deep breath and began to carefully open the crate. As the wooden panels fell away, a magnificent Buddha statue was revealed. Standing at about 4 feet tall, the statue was crafted from smooth, dark stone, its serene expression seeming to radiate peace throughout the room. Sarah stood in awe, her hand resting lightly on the statue's base. "It's beautiful," she whispered to herself, a smile playing on her lips. The statue had been donated anonymously, a fact that both intrigued and slightly concerned her. In all her years at Peaceful Waters, she had never received such a significant gift without knowing its origin. As news of the statue's arrival spread through Pinewood, curious visitors began to trickle into the center. Among them was Jake Miller, a local high school teacher who had been attending meditation sessions at Peaceful Waters for the past few months. Jake had always been skeptical of spiritual practices, but a recent divorce had left him searching for something to fill the void in his life. "Quite the addition you've got here, Reverend," Jake commented, his eyes fixed on the statue's serene face. "Do you know where it came from?" Sarah shook her head. "It was an anonymous donation. But regardless of its origin, I believe it will bring a new energy to our center." As the days passed, the statue became a focal point for the community. Many found themselves drawn to it, spending long hours in quiet contemplation before its tranquil visage. Sarah noticed a change in the atmosphere of the center, a deepening of the peace that usually permeated the space. However, not everyone in Pinewood was pleased with the new addition. Mayor Frank Howell, a staunch traditionalist, voiced his concerns at a town council meeting. "We don't know where this statue came from," he argued, his face flushed with emotion. "What if it brings unwanted attention to our town? What if it's stolen property?" His words sparked a heated debate among the council members and the attending public. Sarah found herself defending not just the statue, but the principles of acceptance and open-mindedness that Peaceful Waters stood for. "The statue harms no one," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the clamor. "It has brought nothing but peace and reflection to those who have visited it. Isn't that what our community should stand for?" Her words seemed to resonate with many, but the seed of doubt had been planted. As Sarah left the meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in Pinewood's usually harmonious atmosphere. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she found herself unable to sleep. Her mind kept drifting back to the statue, to its mysterious arrival and the controversy it had sparked. As she tossed and turned, she began to dream. In her dream, Sarah found herself standing before the statue in the meditation hall. But something was different. The statue seemed to glow with an inner light, casting long shadows across the room. As she watched, mesmerized, the statue's eyes seemed to open, fixing her with a gaze that was both ancient and infinitely wise. A voice, deep and resonant, filled her mind. "Guardian," it said, "you have been chosen." Sarah woke with a start, her heart pounding. The dream had felt so real, so vivid. She glanced at her clock, 3:33 a.m. An auspicious number in many spiritual traditions, she knew. As she lay there, trying to calm her racing thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something profound was about to unfold in Pinewood. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the center earlier than usual. As she approached the meditation hall, she noticed something odd. A stray dog was sitting in front of the statue, its tail wagging slowly. The dog, a scruffy mutt with intelligent eyes, seemed completely at ease in the sacred space. "Hello there," Sarah said softly, approaching the dog. "Where did you come from?" The dog turned to look at her, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw a flicker of understanding in its eyes. It barked once, then turned back to the statue, whining softly. Throughout the day, Sarah noticed the dog returning to the statue multiple times. It never caused any disturbance, simply sitting and observing, as if standing guard. The center's visitors seemed charmed by the dog's presence, many stopping to pet it or offer it treats. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the meditation hall, Sarah found Jake lingering after his usual session. He was staring at the statue, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Everything okay, Jake?" Sarah asked, approaching him. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and wonder. "I had the strangest experience during meditation," he said slowly. "I could have sworn I saw the statue move. Just slightly, like it was breathing. And I heard, well, it's going to sound crazy, but I heard a voice." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, remembering her own dream. "What did the voice say?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Jake shook his head, laughing nervously. "That's the thing, I can't remember. But it left me with this feeling, like I'm supposed to do something. Like I'm part of something bigger. Does that make any sense?" Sarah nodded, placing a comforting hand on Jake's shoulder. "Sometimes, Jake, the path to understanding isn't always clear. But I believe that if we remain open and attentive, the answers will come." As Jake left, Sarah turned back to the statue. The last rays of sunlight were playing across its surface, creating patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. The dog had returned, sitting quietly at the statue's base. Sarah felt a sense of anticipation building within her. Something was happening in Pinewood, something centered around this mysterious statue. As she stood there, bathed in the fading light, she made a silent vow to uncover the truth, no matter where it might lead. Little did Sarah know that her vow would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change her life but the entire fabric of Pinewood itself. The arrival of the Buddha statue was just the beginning of a journey that would test faith, challenge perceptions, and ultimately reveal the hidden connections that bound the community together. As night fell over Pinewood, the statue stood silent and serene, its secret still waiting to be uncovered. And in homes across the town, people drifted off to sleep, unaware that their lives were about to become intertwined in ways they could never have imagined. The following weeks in Pinewood were marked by an air of quiet anticipation. The Buddha statue at Peaceful Waters Buddhist Center had become the talk of the town, drawing curious visitors from neighboring communities. Sarah Thompson found herself busier than ever, balancing her regular duties with the increased interest in the center. The stray dog that had appeared on the day of the statue's arrival had become a fixture at Peaceful Waters. Sarah had taken to calling him Buddy, and he seemed to respond to the name with a wag of his tail. Buddy's presence was a source of comfort for many visitors, his gentle demeanor adding to the center's welcoming atmosphere. One crisp morning, as Sarah was preparing the meditation hall for the day's first session, she noticed Buddy acting strangely. The usually calm dog was pacing back and forth in front of the statue, whining softly and pawing at the ground. "What's the matter, boy?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside him. Buddy looked at her with his soulful eyes, then turned back to the statue, pawing more insistently at a spot on the floor. Intrigued, Sarah examined the area more closely. To her surprise, she noticed a small, almost imperceptible crack in the wooden floorboard. It was so fine that she might never have seen it if not for Buddy's persistence. Just then, Jake Miller walked in, his face lighting up at the sight of Buddy. "Hey there, furry friend," he said, giving the dog a pat. Noticing Sarah's concentrated expression, he asked, "Everything okay, Sarah?" Sarah straightened up, brushing dust from her knees. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Buddy seems to be trying to tell us something about this spot on the floor. There's a tiny crack here. I can't help but wonder if it means anything." Jake crouched down to take a look. "Here," he mused, running his fingers along the crack. "You know, in all the years I've lived in Pinewood, I've never heard much about the history of this building. Do you know anything about it?" Sarah shook her head. "Not much, I'm afraid. The center was already established when I took over 20 years ago. But you've given me an idea, Jake. Maybe it's time we did some digging into the history of Peaceful Waters." Over the next few days, Sarah and Jake found themselves embarking on an impromptu historical investigation. They spent hours at the Pinewood Public Library, poring over old town records and newspapers, Their search yielded little until they stumbled upon a dusty box of documents in the library's basement. "Sarah, look at this," Jake called out, holding up a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Mystery Surrounds Newly Established Buddhist Center." The article, dated 50 years ago, described the opening of Peaceful Waters and mentioned a generous donation from an anonymous benefactor. "Sound familiar?" Jake said with a grin. "Looks like your statue isn't the first mysterious gift the center has received." As they dug deeper, they uncovered more intriguing details. The original founder of Peaceful Waters, a man named David Chen, had reportedly experienced vivid dreams and visions in the weeks following the center's opening. Even more interesting, there were accounts of animals behaving strangely around the property, much like Buddy was doing now. Armed with this new information, Sarah and Jake returned to the center, their minds buzzing with possibilities. They found Buddy waiting for them, his tail wagging as if he knew they had made a breakthrough. "Okay, Buddy," Sarah said, kneeling beside the crack in the floor. "We're listening. What are you trying to tell us?" As if in response, Buddy began to paw at the crack again, this time with more urgency. Jake, inspired by their recent discoveries, began to examine the floorboards more closely. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "these boards look like they might be removable. What if there's something underneath?" With Buddy watching intently, Sarah and Jake carefully pried up the floorboard. To their amazement, they found a small, hollow space beneath. And nestled within that space was an old, leather-bound journal. With trembling hands, Sarah lifted the journal out of its hiding place. The cover was worn and faded, but she could just make out the name David Chen embossed on the front. "This must have belonged to the founder," she breathed, her voice filled with awe. "Jake, do you realize what this could mean?" Jake nodded, his eyes wide with excitement. It could hold the answers to everything, the statue, the dreams, all of it. As they opened the journal, a small piece of paper fluttered to the ground. Buddy immediately picked it up in his mouth, gently depositing it in Sarah's lap. It was a photograph, faded with age, showing a group of people standing in front of Peaceful Waters. In the center of the group was a man they assumed to be David Chen, and beside him, "Is that the same statue?" Jake asked incredulously. Sarah nodded slowly, her mind reeling. The statue in the photograph was unmistakably the same one that now stood in their meditation hall, despite the image being half a century old. As they began to read through the journal, they found themselves drawn into a tale that blurred the lines between reality and the mystical. David Chen wrote of dreams similar to the ones Sarah had been experiencing, of animals acting as messengers, and of a sacred duty to protect something of great importance. "Listen to this," Sarah said, reading aloud from the journal. "The statue is more than it appears. It is a gateway, a protector, and a teacher. Those chosen to guard it will be guided by dreams and aided by the most unexpected of allies. The future of Pinewood depends on the statue remaining safe and its lessons being understood." Jake let out a low whistle. "Well, that certainly adds a new layer to everything. But what does it all mean? What are we supposed to do?" Before Sarah could respond, Buddy let out a soft bark. They turned to see him sitting by the statue, his tail wagging slowly. As they watched, a beam of sunlight broke through the clouds outside, streaming through the window to illuminate the statue. For a brief moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw the statue's expression change, a subtle smile playing on its stone lips. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "it means that we've been chosen for something important. Something that goes beyond just running a meditation center." Jake nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension on his face. "So what's our next move?" Sarah looked down at the journal in her hands, then back at the statue and Buddy. "We keep reading," she said firmly. "We learn everything we can from David's journal. And we stay alert for more signs. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the meditation hall, Sarah and Jake settled in for a long night of reading. Buddy curled up at their feet, his watchful eyes never leaving the statue. Outside, the town of Pinewood continued about its business, unaware of the ancient mystery unfolding in their midst. Little did they know that their discovery was about to set in motion a chain of events that would not only change their lives but potentially the very fabric of reality in Pinewood. As night fell, The statue stood silent and watchful, its secret slowly beginning to unfold. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to peek through the windows of Peaceful Waters Buddhist Center when Sarah Thompson finally closed David Chen's journal. She and Jake had spent the entire night poring over its pages, their minds reeling from the incredible tale it told. Buddy, ever faithful, had remained by their side, his watchful gaze alternating between them and the Buddha statue. "I can't believe it," Jake said, rubbing his tired eyes. "All this time, there was so much more to this place than we ever imagined." Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the worn leather cover of the journal. "David's accounts are extraordinary. The statue, the dreams, the animals, it's all connected to something much bigger than us." As they discussed their findings, a key detail from the journal kept resurfacing in Sarah's mind. David had written about a hidden relic, an object of immense power and significance that was somehow linked to the statue. According to his writings, the relic was concealed somewhere within the center, its location known only to those chosen to protect it. "We need to find it," Sarah said decisively. Whatever this relic is, David believed it was crucial to the well-being of not just the center, but all of Pinewood. Jake agreed, his earlier skepticism all but forgotten in the face of their discoveries. They began a careful, methodical search of the center, paying close attention to any areas David had mentioned in his journal. Buddy followed them from room to room, his behavior growing more excited as they neared the meditation hall. As they re-entered the hall, Buddy rushed to the statue, pawing at its base insistently. Sarah and Jake exchanged a look of understanding. They had assumed the crack in the floor was the extent of the hidden space, but what if there was more? With renewed energy, they began to examine the statue itself. Jake ran his hands along its base, feeling for any irregularities. Suddenly, his fingers caught on something, a small, almost imperceptible seam. "Sarah, I think I've found something," he called out, his voice trembling with excitement. Together, they carefully maneuvered the statue, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded red silk, lay an ornate wooden box. With trembling hands, Sarah lifted it out. The box was small, no larger than a paperback book, but it felt surprisingly heavy. Intricate carvings covered its surface, symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as they looked at them. A simple brass latch held it closed. "This must be it," Sarah whispered. "The relic David wrote about." Jake nodded, his eyes wide with awe. Should we open it?" Sarah hesitated. David's journal had been clear about the power of the relic, warning that it should only be revealed when absolutely necessary. But something, an instinct she couldn't quite explain, told her that this was the right moment. Taking a deep breath, Sarah unlatched the box and slowly opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a cushion of dark velvet, lay a small, intricately carved figurine. It appeared to be made of a material neither of them recognized, not quite stone, not quite metal, with a soft, opalescent sheen that seemed to glow from within. The figurine depicted a seated figure, reminiscent of the Buddha statue but with subtle differences. Its eyes were closed in meditation, and its hands formed a mudra neither Sarah nor Jake had seen before. As they gazed at it, both felt an inexplicable sense of peace and clarity washing over them. Buddy, who had been watching intently, let out a soft whine. As if drawn by an invisible force, he padded over and gently touched his nose to the figurine. The moment he did, a soft, warm light began to emanate from the relic, filling the room with a golden glow. Sarah and Jake watched in amazement as the light seemed to coalesce into shimmering patterns in the air around them. Images began to form, fleeting glimpses of Pinewood's past, present, and possible futures. They saw the town as it had been when Peaceful Waters was first founded, witnessed moments of both joy and strife in the community, and caught glimpses of potential paths the town might take. As the visions faded, Sarah and Jake found themselves breathless, overwhelmed by what they had seen. The relic's glow subsided, but they could still feel its energy pulsing gently, like a heartbeat. "I think I understand now," Sarah said softly. "This relic, it's not just an object of power. It's a connection to the past, to the community, to something greater." Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. "But why now? Why were we chosen to find it?" Before Sarah could respond, They heard the sound of footsteps approaching the meditation hall. Mayor Frank Howell's voice rang out, his tone agitated. "Reverend Thompson? Are you in there? We need to talk about this statue situation." Sarah and Jake exchanged a panicked look. Quickly, they replaced the relic in its box and hid it back in the compartment under the statue. Just as they straightened up, Mayor Howell entered the hall, his face flushed with what looked like a mixture of anger and concern. "Ah, there you are," he said, his eyes narrowing as he noticed Jake. "Mr. Miller, I didn't expect to see you here so early." Sarah stepped forward, trying to project an air of calm she didn't entirely feel. "Good morning, Mayor Howell. What can we do for you?" The mayor's frown deepened. "I've been hearing some disturbing rumors about strange occurrences here at the center. Lights in the middle of the night, odd animal behavior. Some folks are saying they've seen things, impossible things. I'm concerned about the effect all this is having on our community." As Mayor Howell spoke, Sarah could feel the weight of the hidden relic's presence behind her. She knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that the mayor's visit was no coincidence. The relic had shown them visions of Pinewood's possible futures, and now, it seemed, they were being called upon to shape that future. "Mayor," Sarah began, choosing her words carefully, "I understand your concerns. Change can be unsettling, and I know the statue's arrival has brought a lot of attention to Peaceful Waters. But I assure you, everything that's happening here is for the good of Pinewood." Jake stepped up beside her, adding his support. "It's true, Mayor. I've seen it myself. The center, the statue, they're bringing people together, helping them find peace and purpose." Mayor Howell looked unconvinced. "Be that as it may, I have a responsibility to this town. If these disturbances continue, I may have to take official action." As the mayor spoke, Buddy, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stood and walked over to him. To everyone's surprise, the dog gently placed his paw on the mayor's shoe, looking up at him with those soulful eyes. For a moment, Mayor Howell's stern expression softened. He reached down to pat Buddy's head, and as he did, Sarah noticed a subtle change come over him. The tension seemed to leave his shoulders, and when he looked up, there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. I'm not sure why I was so worked up," he said, shaking his head as if to clear it. "Perhaps I've been too hasty in my judgments. Reverend Thompson, would you be willing to meet with the town council to discuss the center's role in the community? I think it's time we had a proper conversation about all this." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. "Of course, Mayor. We'd be happy to." As Mayor Howell left, promising to be in touch about the meeting, Sarah and Jake exchanged meaningful looks. They both knew that this was just the beginning of their journey as guardians of the relic. "We have a lot to learn," Sarah said, glancing at the statue. "And I have a feeling we don't have much time to do it." Jake nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension on his face. "Whatever comes next, we're in this together." As they spoke, Buddy returned to his spot by the statue, his tail wagging slowly. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the meditation hall. In that moment of quiet, Sarah could almost feel the pulse of the hidden relic, a reminder of the extraordinary path that lay ahead of them. Outside, the town of Pinewood was coming to life, unaware of the ancient power that had awakened in their midst. As Sarah and Jake prepared to face the challenges ahead, they knew that their actions would shape not just their own destinies, but the future of their entire community. The journey that had begun with the arrival of a mysterious statue was about to take them places they could never have imagined. In the days following their discovery of the relic, Sarah and Jake found themselves in a whirlwind of activity. The impending meeting with the town council loomed large in their minds, but it was far from their only concern. They spent every spare moment poring over David Chen's journal, trying to glean as much information as possible about their newfound roles as guardians. One sunny afternoon, as they sat in Sarah's small office at the back of the center, Jake leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "You know, when I first started coming here for meditation, I never imagined I'd end up part of some ancient mystical legacy." Sarah smiled, looking up from the journal. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? But I have to admit, I'm glad I'm not facing this alone." As they talked, Buddy, who had become a constant presence in their lives, perked up his ears. A moment later, They heard the front door of the center open, followed by familiar footsteps. "Hello, Sarah. Jake. You here?" The voice belonged to Linda Hawkins, the town librarian. She had been a regular at Peaceful Waters for years and had become a close friend to both Sarah and Jake. In the office, "Linda," Sarah called out. Linda appeared in the doorway, her kind face creased with concern. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. It's just, well, I've been hearing things. Weird things. And I thought maybe you two might know something about it." Jake and Sarah exchanged a glance. They had been so wrapped up in their own discoveries that they hadn't fully considered how the changes might be affecting the rest of the town. "What kind of weird things?" Jake asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Linda settled into a chair, absent-mindedly petting Buddy as she gathered her thoughts. "Well, for starters, people have been having strange dreams. Vivid ones, all centered around the center and that new statue. And then there's the animals." "The animals?" Sarah prompted, her interest piqued. Linda nodded. "Pets all over town have been acting oddly. Dogs barking at nothing, cats staring for hours at blank walls. And just yesterday, I saw a whole flock of birds circling the center, moving in perfect unison. It was beautiful, but unsettling." As Linda spoke, Sarah felt a familiar warmth in her pocket, where she had taken to carrying a small piece of the relic, a shard that had broken off when they first opened the box. She had found that keeping it close helped her think more clearly, especially when it came to matters related to their guardian duties. "Linda," Sarah began carefully, "what would you say if we told you that these occurrences might not be as random as they seem? That there might be a purpose behind them?" Linda's eyes widened. "You mean, you know something about all this?" Jake leaned forward. "We do. And we could use your help. But before we say more, we need to know, do you trust us?" Without hesitation, Linda nodded. "Of course I do. You two are the most level-headed people I know. If you're involved in whatever this is, then I'm sure it's for a good reason." And so, over the next hour, Sarah and Jake shared their story with Linda. They told her about the hidden compartment, the relic, and the visions they had experienced. They explained about David Chen's journal and the concept of guardians. Throughout it all, Linda listened with rapt attention, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. When they finished, Linda sat back, taking a deep breath. "Well," she said after a moment, "that certainly explains a lot. But what does it all mean? What are we supposed to do?" Sarah smiled at Linda's use of we. She had hoped their friend would be willing to join them, but hearing it confirmed filled her with relief. "That's what we're trying to figure out," Jake said. "The journal talks about guardians in the plural, so we know it's not just meant to be the two of us. We think we're supposed to form a group of protectors, people who can help safeguard the relic and guide Pinewood towards a positive future." Linda nodded slowly. "And you want me to be part of this group?" "If you're willing," Sarah confirmed. "Your knowledge of the town's history and your connection to the community would be invaluable." Before Linda could respond, Buddy suddenly stood up, his tail wagging excitedly. A moment later, they heard another knock at the center's front door. "Now who could that be?" Jake wondered aloud as he went to answer it. He returned a few minutes later, accompanied by old Joe, the town's resident handyman. Joe was in his 70s, with a weathered face that spoke of a life lived outdoors and eyes that twinkled with wisdom and mischief in equal measure. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Joe said, taking in the serious expressions on their faces. "But I had the strangest feeling I needed to come here today. Like something was calling me." Sarah felt the warmth from the relic shard intensify. She glanced at Jake, seeing her own realization mirrored in his eyes. It seemed the relic was gathering its guardians. Over the next hour, they once again recounted their story, this time to both Linda and Joe. As they spoke, Sarah could feel a sense of rightness settling over the room. This was meant to be. These people, Jake, Linda, Joe, and herself, they were the guardians Pinewood needed. When they finished, Joe let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "You know, I've lived in this town my whole life. Seen a lot of strange things come and go. But this feels different. Feels important." Linda nodded in agreement. I think we all feel it. So, what's our next move? Sarah reached into her pocket, pulling out the relic shard. As soon as she did, a soft glow filled the room, seeming to emanate not just from the shard but from each of them as well. I think, Sarah said slowly, our next move is to fully accept our roles as guardians. To commit to protecting the relic and guiding Pinewood. Are we all in agreement? One by one, Jake, Linda, and Joe nodded, their faces solemn but determined. As they did, the glow intensified, and for a brief moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw shimmering threads of light connecting all of them, with Buddy at the center. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mayor Howell, confirming the town council meeting for the following evening. Well, Jake said with a wry smile, looks like we've got our first challenge as guardians. Are we ready to face the council? Sarah looked around at her friends, no, her fellow guardians, and felt a surge of confidence. We're ready, she said firmly. Together, we can handle anything. As the newly formed group of guardians began to discuss their strategy for the council meeting, none of them noticed Buddy slipping quietly out of the room. The dog made his way to the meditation hall, where he sat before the Buddha statue, his intelligent eyes fixed on its serene face. For a moment, the statue's eyes seemed to open, meeting Buddy's gaze with a look of ancient wisdom and approval. Outside, the sun was setting over Pinewood, casting long shadows across the town. Change was coming, guided by the hands of the newly awakened guardians. And as night fell, the relic pulsed with energy, its power flowing out into the community, preparing the way for the challenges and wonders that lay ahead. The evening of the town council meeting arrived with an air of tension hanging over Pinewood. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet streets, Sarah, Jake, Linda, and old Joe gathered at Peaceful Waters Buddhist Center. They had spent the past day preparing for this moment, poring over David Chen's journal and discussing strategies for addressing the council's concerns. Remember, Sarah said as they did one final review, our goal isn't just to defend the center. We need to help the council understand the positive impact it's having on Pinewood. Jake nodded, adjusting his tie nervously. Right. We're not just protecting a building or a statue. We're guardians of the town's spiritual well-being. As they prepared to leave, Buddy appeared in the doorway, his tail wagging slowly. Sarah knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. Wish us luck, boy, she murmured. To her surprise, Buddy gently took the hem of her sleeve in his mouth, tugging her towards the meditation hall. I think he wants us to do something before we go, Linda observed. Following Buddy's lead, the group entered the meditation hall. The Buddha statue seemed to glow in the fading light, its serene expression a stark contrast to the anxiety they all felt. As they gathered around it, Sarah felt the familiar warmth of the relic shard in her pocket. Almost instinctively, the guardians formed a circle around the statue. Sarah withdrew the shard, its soft luminescence filling the room. As if guided by an unseen force, they each reached out, touching the shard together. The moment their fingers made contact, a surge of energy flowed through them. Images flashed through their minds, glimpses of Pinewood's past, present, and potential futures. They saw the town as it had been when David Chen first founded Peaceful Waters, witnessed moments of both hardship and joy in the community, and caught tantalizing glimpses of what Pinewood might become. As the visions faded, they found themselves breathless, overwhelmed by what they had experienced. But along with the awe came a sense of clarity and purpose. They understood now, on a deeper level, why their role as guardians was so crucial. Well, old Joe said, breaking the silence, I reckon we're as ready as we'll ever be. With renewed confidence, they made their way to the town hall. The council chamber was packed, with what seemed like half of Pinewood in attendance. Mayor Howell sat at the center of the council table, his expression unreadable as Sarah and her companions took their seats. Thank you all for coming, the mayor began, his voice echoing in the crowded room. We're here tonight to discuss the recent events surrounding Peaceful Waters Buddhist Center. Reverend Thompson, would you like to start? Sarah stood, feeling the eyes of the entire town upon her. But as she began to speak, she felt a warmth spreading through her, reminiscent of the energy from the relic. Words flowed easily, and she found herself speaking not just about the center, but about community, spirituality, and the interconnectedness of all things. As Sarah spoke, something remarkable began to happen. The tension in the room seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of calm and thoughtfulness. Even the most skeptical council members appeared to be listening with genuine interest. When Sarah finished, there was a moment of profound silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Buddy trotted into the chamber, making his way to the center of the room. He sat there, looking around at the assembled townspeople with his intelligent eyes. Mayor Howell cleared his throat. "I'm not sure pets are allowed in here, but before he could finish, Buddy let out a single, clear bark. And in that moment, something shifted in the room. People began to murmur, sharing stories of their own strange experiences over the past weeks, dreams of unity and purpose, encounters with unusually behaved animals, moments of unexpected clarity and insight. As the stories flowed, Sarah and her fellow guardians exchanged knowing glances. The relic's influence was spreading, touching the lives of everyone in Pinewood in subtle but profound ways. Finally, Mayor Howell held up his hands for silence. "It seems," he said slowly, "that there's more going on here than we initially thought. Reverend Thompson, I believe we owe you and Peaceful Waters an apology. It's clear that the center is having a positive impact on our community." A cheer went up from the crowd. As it died down, one of the council members spoke up. "Mayor, I move that we not only allow Peaceful Waters to continue its operations unimpeded, but that we also consider ways the town can support and expand its programs." The motion was quickly seconded and passed unanimously. As the meeting adjourned, people crowded around Sarah and her companions, eager to share their experiences and express their support. In the midst of the excitement, Sarah felt a tug on her sleeve. It was Jake, gesturing towards the exit where Buddy was waiting, tail wagging. Understanding immediately, Sarah gathered Linda and Old Joe, and they slipped out of the town hall. They made their way back to Peaceful Waters, guided by Buddy's unwavering path. As they entered the meditation hall, they found the Buddha statue glowing with a soft, pulsing light. "I think," Linda said softly, "it's time for us to learn more about our roles as guardians." Old Joe nodded, his weathered face solemn. "Aye, and about the power we're meant to protect." As if in response to their words, the hidden compartment beneath the statue opened of its own accord. The box containing the relic rose into the air, hanging suspended before them. Sarah reached out, her hand steady as she opened the box. The figurine inside seemed to shimmer with an inner light, its features more detailed and alive than they had ever seen before. As they gathered around the relic, each placing a hand upon it, they felt a surge of energy unlike anything they had experienced before. In that moment, they weren't just four individuals chosen for an important task. They were guardians, connected to an ancient line of protectors, their spirits intertwined with the very essence of Pinewood and all who called it home. The relic began to pulse with light, and once again, visions flowed through their minds. But this time, they saw more than just glimpses of past and future. They saw the intricate web of energy that connected all living things, the delicate balance of forces that shaped the world around them. As the visions subsided, they found themselves changed. Knowledge of ancient rituals and mystical practices had been imparted to them, along with a deeper understanding of their responsibilities as guardians. "We have much to learn," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe and determination. "And much to do." Jake nodded, a smile playing on his lips. "But we're not alone. We have each other, and we have the support of the entire town." Linda and Old Joe murmured their agreement. As they stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the relic, they felt a sense of purpose and unity unlike anything they had ever known. Outside, the night sky was alive with stars, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of possibility through the streets of Pinewood. The town slept peacefully, unaware of the profound changes taking place in their midst. But in the hearts of its newly awakened guardians, a fire had been lit, a fire that would guide Pinewood towards a future filled with hope, harmony, and untold wonders. As Buddy curled up at the base of the statue, his watchful eyes never leaving the guardians, the relic's glow subsided to a gentle pulse, in rhythm with the beating hearts of Sarah, Jake, Linda, and Old Joe. Their journey as guardians had truly begun, and with it, a new chapter in the history of Pinewood was about to unfold. In the weeks following the town council meeting, Pinewood underwent a subtle but profound transformation. The air seemed fresher, colors more vibrant, and there was a palpable sense of harmony that permeated every corner of the small town. At the heart of this change were the four guardians: Sarah, Jake, Linda, and Old Joe, who had embraced their newfound roles with a mixture of determination and wonder. Peaceful Waters Buddhist Center had become a hub of activity, attracting visitors from neighboring towns and even a few curious tourists who had heard whispers of the Pinewood miracle. Sarah found herself busier than ever, balancing her regular duties with the secret responsibilities of a guardian. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted lazily past the center's windows, the guardians gathered for what had become their regular meeting. Buddy, as always, was curled up at their feet, his watchful eyes never straying far from the Buddha statue. "I still can't quite believe all this is real," Jake mused, absently rubbing the spot on his chest where he now wore a small fragment of the relic on a chain. They had each taken a piece, finding that it helped them stay connected to their purpose and to each other. Linda nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I know what you mean. But then I look around town and see the changes. It's hard to deny the impact we're having." Old Joe leaned back in his chair, his weathered hands clasped over his stomach. "Impact's one thing. Question is, are we doing right by the town? By the power we've been given?" It was a question they had all grappled with in their own ways. The responsibility of being a guardian was not a light one, and they had spent countless hours discussing the ethics of their role and the best way to guide Pinewood's future. Sarah was about to respond when she felt a familiar warmth from her relic fragment. Looking around, she saw that the others had sensed it too. As one, they turned towards the Buddha statue, which had begun to emit a soft, pulsing glow. Without a word, they rose and approached the statue. Buddy trotted alongside them, his tail wagging with anticipation. As they formed a circle around the statue, each placing a hand on its base, the world around them seemed to fade away. Visions flooded their minds, more vivid and detailed than ever before. They saw Pinewood as it could be, a beacon of hope and harmony, a place where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds blurred. They saw themselves, not just as they were, but as they could become wise, compassionate leaders, their hearts and minds in tune with the deepest truths of existence. But the visions didn't stop there. They expanded outward, showing the ripple effects of their actions. Other towns, inspired by Pinewood's transformation, embarking on their own journeys of spiritual and community growth. A network of light spreading across the country, each point representing a place where the barriers between the mundane and the mystical had thinned. As the visions faded, the guardians found themselves back in the meditation hall, breathless and awestruck. But something had changed. The knowledge and power that had been gradually building within them over the past weeks had crystallized into something more tangible, more purposeful. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "we've just been given a glimpse of our true destiny. This isn't just about Pinewood anymore. We're part of something much bigger." Jake nodded, his eyes shining with a new light. "It's like, we're seed planters. What's happening here in Pinewood, it's just the beginning. But we can't lose sight of our roots," Linda added. "Pinewood is still our home, our primary responsibility." Old Joe chuckled, shaking his head in wonder. "Well, folks, looks like we've got our work cut out for us. Question is, where do we start?" As if in answer, Buddy let out a soft bark. The guardians turned to see Mayor Howell standing in the doorway of the meditation hall, a look of amazement on his face. I'm not sure why I'm here," the mayor said, his voice filled with confusion and awe. "I was in my office, and suddenly I felt this overwhelming urge to come to the center. And when I arrived, I saw this light." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the statue. Sarah stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the mayor's shoulder. "Frank," she said, using his first name for perhaps the first time, "I think it's time we had a talk. A real talk, about the future of Pinewood." Over the next few hours, the guardians shared their story with Mayor Howell. To their surprise and relief, he listened with an open mind and heart, occasionally nodding as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. "You know," he said when they had finished, "a part of me wants to dismiss all this as impossible. But I've lived in Pinewood my whole life, and I've never seen the town like this. People are happier, more connected. It's like we're all part of something greater than ourselves." Jake leaned forward, his expression earnest. "That's exactly it, Mayor. And with your help, we can take it even further. Pinewood could be a model for communities everywhere." The mayor was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally, he looked up, a new resolve in his eyes. "All right," he said. "I'm in. Whatever you need from me, from the town government, you've got it. Let's make Pinewood a beacon of hope for the world." As Mayor Howell left, filled with plans and ideas for Pinewood's future, the Guardians exchanged smiles of relief and excitement. They had taken a crucial step forward in their mission. "Well," old Joe said, stretching as he stood up, "I reckon that's enough world-changing for one day. Who's up for some of Linda's famous apple pie?" They laughed, the tension of the day dissipating. As they prepared to leave the center, Sarah paused, looking back at the Buddha statue. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw it smile. That night, as Pinewood slept peacefully under a blanket of stars, the Guardians dreamed. They dreamed of the challenges and wonders that lay ahead, of the lives they would touch and the changes they would bring. But most of all, they dreamed of hope, hope for Pinewood, hope for the world, and hope for the future they were helping to create. In the center, Buddy curled up at the base of the statue, his watchful vigil never ceasing. The relic pulsed gently, its energy flowing out into the town, nurturing the seeds of change that had been planted. And so, as a new day dawned, the Guardians of Pinewood embraced their destiny, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They knew that their journey was just beginning, but with each other, with the power of the relic, and with the support of their community, they were prepared to shape a future filled with wonder, harmony, and boundless possibility. The story of Pinewood and its Guardians was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold, a tale of mystical forces and human potential that would ripple out into the world, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. And at the heart of it all was a small town in America, where the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary had begun to blur, and where a group of unlikely heroes had embraced a destiny beyond their wildest dreams.